ACL permissions. All right, so we've looked at the general environment here, okay, of the Adminhtml section. So we have to talk about this fundamental component where we can set up roles for users, for different admin users, and give them access to different areas, with varying degrees of granularity. So that's what we're going to look at. So ACL, obviously we need to authenticate users. That's username, password. And then we have the actual ACL data itself, or really configuration. It's just XML. So if you look in your admin under System, Permissions, and then Roles, you can look at the administrative piece for Magento's ACL. System, permissions, roles. So incidentally, when you're administering roles and users, users have to be saved with a role. So you'd want to create your roles first, just to save an extra step. So in here, you can see I have a test role. And if I look in role resources, I see, oh, this person has access to only catalog. So you see this hierarchy and the ever-present Magento DHTML tree. So at the highest level, we have like our menu items: sales, catalog, customers, promotions, newsletter, CMS, reports, everything we looked at. So here I have access to catalog and system, and you can see that you not only have can not only give people access to these top level items, you can also drill down and make that permission, define that permission with a little more restriction. And the building of this tree is all just from some XML, which we'll be reviewing in a second. So with Enterprise Edition, you also get a scope for these users. So you can tie them to individual websites. One thing to note, do not mess with the admin role. It is possible, of course, to reset the permissions for the admin user. Normally, the admin user just has all. And if you change that, then, of course, you will not have access to change it back. And that happens, it seems, in at least every other class. So I encourage you, actually, if you will, go ahead and make a test role right now and limit the access to, say, for example, catalog and system. And we'll be using that role later.
Okay. So create a new user role.
Well, you want to create a new role first.
Oh, okay. Permission new role. Add new role. Test, right?
Yeah, you name it what you want. Mine is named test.
Then what?
Well, then give your permissions to catalog and system. At least catalog. We'll be using that later.
Oh, resource, right?
That's correct.
Custom, right? Role scope.
Yes, and you have to switch this to custom in order to see this permission tree. And actually, in fact, that is definitely the case. For this, what we're going to do is we're actually going to add our training animal module. We're going to have an action under catalog, and then we'll also have some related configuration here under system. So the reason I didn't have anything selected here was because those were in there, and then I removed that configuration. Yes, and then you'll want to save the role. Yeah, and then if you want, go ahead and create a user. So under System Permissions, Users. And then, yes, you would want to, you'll need to set up a new user and assign that user to the test role. Okay, so obviously if you want someone to have a super user role, just select all and you're done. Otherwise, you need to go through and select your permissions. So what we're doing is we're giving people access to different actions, basically, in the admin. And that's done by implementing this isAllowed action in our controller, which we'll look at. Again, otherwise, if you don't have this returns the true is assumed, and I believe, and you'll have, yes. So normally this returns true, which means that anyone would be allowed regardless of ACL permissions. Okay, and this is what we just did. Went to System Permissions and Roles, and we created a sample, a test user and role for us to use later on. All right, and so this is part of the reason that we are extending from Adminhtml controller action, so that we can then also use isAllowed. We'll just redeclare this for ourselves. All right? And further belaboring the point, we are simply just setting up the environment so that we can add our ACL permissions to this tree and limit users if we want to. One thing to note, in older installs of Magento, all of this XML configuration that sets up ACL was defined in config XML. Now it is found in another XML file, Adminhtml XML. And that has this basic structure here. So config and menu, right here, this menu node, this builds the menu at the top of the admin panel. And ACL obviously builds out that ACL tree. And there are similar syntaxes here. The structure of these two will be similar. So what does that structure look like? Well, in the case of Adminhtml, inside a config node, again we have menu, and then we define a catalog node, okay? So that'll be the container probably for catalog and all things catalog related. So here we declare a title. This will be what's shown, for example, in the top of your admin, catalog. That's where that comes from. And you can set a sort order, doesn't need to be sequential, but obviously the lower the number, the further to the left. So then you can also set up a dependency, declare the module. Of course, catalog would depend on Mage catalog being loaded. All right, so then we define children of that catalog node. And in this case, one of the children is products. Well, this is how our manage products menu item gets established. So that's the hierarchy. So at the top level, directly under menu, is where we declare this top layer items. And then any item under that would need to be in this children node inside catalog. All right, so menu, catalog, children, products. And then if we wanted a little flyout menu on that, we would declare a children node inside products and do this all over again, and so forth. So what happens here in this child node is, well, we're declaring a title, and we're calling this action. We're saying this is the link that this, basically, that this title should go to. So in this case, Adminhtml catalog product. Okay, make sense? So, okay, along with menu, under config, we have ACL. And ACL, resources, admin. So this will always be the beginning of an ACL declaration. So children, catalog. That's the connection. So when building that out, if you were adding a top-level menu item, the path for that would be config, ACL, resources, admin, children, and then your node, which should match up with the node, should have the same value, or the node name should be the same as what was configured under menu. That's where the connection happens. And I'll show you the effect of that in a second when I log in as my test user. So then, but then after that, it's a similar, it's basically the same kind of syntax. You define a title, you can set a sort order, and then if we wanted to have children in here, we would declare a children node, and then in this case, we would have products, and so forth. So it's basically node, children, node, children, node, children, all the way down. What does all this XML do? Well, menu builds this out. But also, based on the ACL configuration, and the reason those two are the same is because if my user has been restricted from any of those things, I won't see them. Which is nice, because there's nothing worse than showing people things that they can't do. Richard would get support tickets if that were the case. I can't click on that. So, these should say, sorry, these should probably say module. ACL for system configuration. So here is, again, let's see. Now this is for the system configuration. So we have the same pattern that we had before. Config, ACL, resources, admin, children, system. So that's that system, top level. Looks like we have catalog. So inside this children node, we would probably have system, reports, CMS, newsletter, all of those as sibling nodes. And then system, children, config, children. And this is simply how we give people, this is how we set up ACL for the different panels in system configuration. So those are the two things we can affect with the ACL. Items in system configuration and menu items in the admin. If we have the task of making an admin module, then we'll need to consider setting up our ACL. So we'll need to consider, okay, I'll need an Adminhtml XML file and a system XML file in my module. And the cool thing is, once we've done that, that's the basic machinery, that's the basic information that we need to actually set up the ACL. And then after that, it's just simply a matter of implementing the ACL check in our router, or in our controller. So, well, it looks like this. All right, so let's say first things first. Who can explain to me what we're doing in here? And we'll start here with menu. So remember, the menu node is where is where the admin area goes to build out the menu up top.
You're adding a child under catalog?
Exactly. I'm just referring to some existing nodes. So this is probably defined in the catalog module. Config menu, catalog, children. So I'm adding something. Probably it's going to be adjacent to. It will probably be adjacent to managed products. So, all right. So under catalog in children, so a sibling node of this would be that product node that we saw earlier. So config menu, catalog, children, training. Obviously the title that we want to show as this menu item. Setting a sort order for it. And then I'm setting a child of that, and I'm applying my action there. And you see here, because we're using the existing Adminhtml route, we'll use that same front name and just add our module and our index controller.
Not front name though.
Yeah, well, not front name, finding front name through this node. Yes. So what have I done under children here? So inside of my training node, I've just declared children. And then stalls, if I wanted another menu under that, I would declare children inside stalls. So obviously you can see stalls, training, these are arbitrary. But I'll need to know them for the purpose of my ACL. So you can see how they map out. So ACL, resources, admin, children, that's the point at which these two start to sync up. So, and again, it'll be children, something, children, something, children, something. No matter how deep you go.
So what this ACL resources corresponding to? It's under the permission, right?
Yes, correct. This is how the menu is built up top, and this is how that ACL tree, when we were editing roles, this is where that information comes from. And that's it.
Okay.
Now, when the menu is being generated, the user's ACL is considered. And ACL, by the way, is set when you log in. So users, so generally, if you change permissions, you actually have to log out and log back in for those permissions to be set. But so there's a couple of things to remember. Okay, so first of all, what are we doing? Well, we are configuring, adding something to the menu, and we're setting up ACL. And we do that with the menu node and with the ACL node. And the pattern that follows for each is, in the case of menu, top level item, and then children, something, children, something, children, something.
Right.
And you can always refer to this as an example. This is a fairly complete example, including adding a title attribute to the link.
Okay.
All right?
I'm sorry, where did this get saved?
This is adminhtml.xml under our modules etc folder. Yeah, but again, just in terms of keeping this straight in my mind, I always think of it as, okay, I know for both of these it'll be like something, children, something, children, something, children, and basically the sub items go in that children node. And then I have to just remember that the path for basically the path where you start for ACL is different, because here it's menu and then we start. Here it's ACL resources admin, children, and then we start. So once we have done this, let's see if it had any effect. Now, and again, another thing to point out now that we've done install scripts, remember, version numbers only affect data when we're doing installs and upgrades. we can make all of these changes without iterating version numbers or incrementing version numbers. Okay.
Working when we try to go to edit our role, is wrong tab configuration.
Ah, that's perfectly understandable because we're missing a corresponding piece, and that is system XML. Because here, let's see, I think, look at this node. If you comment out this node, you'll be fine.
Oh, because you're adding the piece of the system.
Yes. So here I'm setting trying to set ACL on something that doesn't exist. So I think if we do this, we should be fine. But let's see.
And the reason why you were doing that in Adminhtml is because you were just adding something under the system menu?
Yes, correct. So yeah, and that's the other tricky thing with that. That's the other tricky thing with this ACL node here. ACL can do it's kind of revealed in two different ways. So here, basically under the children under the admin, so we have, here we specified catalog, and we can also specify system. Yeah. So children, catalog, system. In the system node, these are things that are internal, inside that page. Up here, we're actually going to be, basically everywhere else, we're going to be dealing with, well, actually, let me backtrack from there. So the children of any node in here, so basically ACL resources, admin, some node, children, admin children, some node, children. So these are the things under these different modules, all right? Boy, this is maybe more confusing to explain than to understand, but I don't know. I'll let you guys tell me. So under the big difference is under system children config node. So this path would be ACL resources, admin, children, system, children, config. These are the things that are, these are sections that appear in the system configuration page.
You usually do that in the system XML?
How come?
Right, but no. You configure what shows up in general. This is setting up the ACL for it.
And that's done in Adminhtml only?
Exactly. So yeah, that's the other tricky thing about the ACL node. So again, this path, ACL resources, admin, children, system, children, config, children. This is where we start to drill into that structure inside the system configuration page. It's sort of a mixture of, it's a bit of a rough mix of functionality. Let us look at, well, I can't do this yet, but in the admin, what this would look like is in the system configuration page. So on the one hand, everything that's not in that system configuration node up here is going to affect whether or not we see or have access to these items. And it is both see and have access. It's not just hiding the route, it's preventing access. So there's that. Under that system config node, though, we can drill into something that we specify in yet another XML file, and we can actually set up ACL for these different panels. So if I wanted to, I could set up a user that couldn't change locale options, for example, just with the correct XPath. I'm sorry, it's a lot of XML. Remember when I said the very first day Magento is a configuration-based MVC system? Hopefully you believe that by now. Now I should be able to go, let's see, under system configuration. No, not system configuration. Under permissions, thank you, roles. resources.
Training.
Oh, look at that.
How come it's already checked?
Well, because I don't know that I actually saved it from before when I was changing it, and previously obviously I had this configuration in my system, so
Oh,
this value was already saved. Okay, so now if I were to, for example, log out, and log in as test, we're happy. So obviously again, I did this for my test user, not my sole admin user. So you can see here though, that's the nice thing, is the only options I see are catalog and system. And furthermore, I only have access to that option. And I will say, one of the best things you can do for your clients or maybe for the people in your company is make sure, probably if you have multiple users in your admin, most of them do not need all admin privileges. And furthermore, the more privileges you give them, especially if you give them access to roles and permissions, etc., they can really hose things up. So try and limit those permissions as much as possible.